short of having a bill that says the existing contract shall continue in effect. Let's assume our teacher's contract expires August 31st, and we don't have one in place. We've got no contract. Are we then entitled to say, well, you know what? We want you to work an extra 5 days a year and an extra 2 hours a day?
Right. I'm not arguing for the merits. All I'm saying is that if this bill passes, where they say the contract essentially continues, that option of reducing those wages and benefits is no longer open to you. And you may have to look at other statutory entitlements of children that you would have to cut based on the balanced budget statutes.
Well, let me present to you a different scenario. Let's say some school committee decided to give someone a raise of 5% for 2 years and bargain out some other benefits. And now comes another school committee and says, we are not bargaining. We are not bargaining this year, next year, and the year after that. Why would we? We locked ourselves in particular good contract. Why would we look at this?
But when the contracts continue, they continue with the same salary. They don't continue with a 5% raise or whatever.
Correct.
Right. That's right.
Correct. Salary increases don't continue.
Right.
But so say the contract expires and we have no significant deficit. What then?
I think that's a much murkier area.
But
And
that's what concerns me.
Right, and you mean, in other words, a school committee saying, boy, we really don't like those teachers, and even though we got plenty to go, we're going to go out and cut that contract to pieces.
You know, opposing
as soon as it's
something like
over.
this seems to open the door to that kind of abuse. We're not in a financial crisis, but there are things we don't like in that contract, so we'll let it expire and then we'll just change those things.
Well, there's a lot of arguments and debate around that, because in many contracts that have grown up over the years, it had taken 30, 40 years worth of negotiating to put a lot of stuff in there, some of which is really not good, but it's just been in there forever, and should come out of the contract, but it's very difficult to negotiate them out. So there's an argument that can be made that, yeah, maybe you should be able to do that. And I can't think of particular, but work rules, not going into people's money or benefits, but rather who gets a particular job and how you assign teachers and things that make a difference in children's achievement. And we say, wait a minute, we want to do it the way we think is best educationally, and the union, because of language that was negotiated 25 years ago, says, no, you can't do that. You have to do it based on seniority, not on who the best teacher is, for example. That kind of stuff you might want to have come out of the contract, and that might be a vehicle to do that. I'm really not taking a position one way or another on it. I just want to let you know that the legislature has created a very complex, almost a Rube Goldberg thing between the financing and the negotiating and whatnot, and by their putting a cap on things as well have complicated it further. So were they to tell you, all I wanted to point out to you was that if they say that you must do certain things regarding collective bargaining, in light of Judge Silverstein's decision, there may be a problem where it forces you into making cuts that you probably wouldn't or shouldn't make for other things.
I'm just concerned that if we eliminate what has been standard practice, namely to continue the terms of the existing contract until you negotiate a new one, if we discontinue that, we know the ruling was if you've got a big deficit, you can dictate terms. Right. What happens if we've got we've gotten rid of the standard practice of continuing the terms and we have no deficit? What then? We've got this big void.
Well,
we're not.
Just a second. Is this my understanding? Is my understanding that this legislation is to introduce the contract continuation as opposed to abolish it? Right now, there is a continuation of the contract.
Judge Silverstein essentially said that contract continuation is out the window. After 3 years. In other words, in 3 years. Yeah, and what I would suggest to you is move cautiously, because I would fully anticipate that the NEA is going to appeal that to the Supreme Court, and we'll have to wait. I would assume that's going to happen. I would be surprised if it didn't. And the Supreme Court's going to weigh in as to whether they agree with Judge Silverstein. That may take us 6 months to a year from now to hear what the final word is on that interpretation of the law. I thought, frankly, I was a little surprised by Judge Silverstein's decision. I thought it was going to come down that, yeah, the contract does continue. And I won't bore you with the reasons why, but I thought he was going to say that. Now, he didn't. And we just have to, frankly, I guess on his ruling, I would say, keep your powder dry, because until we hear from the Supreme Court, we're not going to really know whether that's good law or not. I'm just saying that this particular continuation clause in there could have the effect, if his ruling is upheld, that teachers would get a preference over other people in how you spend your money. They'd be at the top of the food chain, in other words, as opposed to busing people eating.
All these legislations, one after another, do one thing. They basically constrain all our decision-making process, all the management rights, with the exception of one, to pay. We are left with one. You just pay. The rest is going to be decided by you, by someone else. So how could we actually go for this? What is the interest for us to actually support that?
I'm just concerned that
Not too
it
close to
creates this legal void where there is no contract, and then
There is
even
status
even
quo
if
right now. But this is not to abolish the contract continuation, but to build it into the law.
so your understanding is then that if this does not pass and a contract is expired and there is no deficit, it would be continued?
I think the school committee, well, let's start with people who are of good intentions and want things to work in a proper way. But you haven't reached an agreement. You're into your 3 years, and you're negotiating and mediating, whatever, with teachers, and you both want to keep at the process, but the contract has expired. I've seen it many times. The parties have done a memo of understanding that the old contract will continue for another 6 months or until we've reached a new agreement. So it's not like going off a cliff. If the committee as a body says we're not at war with our teachers, we're not interested in gutting this contract, we want to just have more time to talk, I would recommend to you that, and I'm sure the union would agree with it, that we sit and come to an agreement. I agree with you. It does leave it very vague. From the union, I'd be nervous about it. I'd be very concerned that the entire contract is going to get gutted after 3 years by the school committee. So I would want you to agree to a memo of understanding to continue it. And, I see no reason not to do that unless you're at war. In East Providence, they were at war. The intent was to gut the contract.
We've done that before.
Yeah.
We did the memo of understanding to continue it.
Yeah.
We all sat down and signed papers and went along when things were good.
But you wouldn't need I think it's up in the air. If the legislature passes this, that will be the law. In other words, that will supersede Judge Silverstein's decision, in my opinion. So if they say the law is it continues, then it won't be decided by the Supreme Court. That decides it, I think.
So we want to have that the rights of the teachers are higher than the rights of the students. And we are not going to.
It's not what I want.
Well, but that's what Attorney Robinson said just right now, that's what this legislation is going to do.
It's like possible.
Well, it's not possible. Understand so even if it's a possibility of this, I'm against that because our role is to protect the students, and obviously, not necessarily. We cannot vote for something or support something which is potentially going to harm the students on behalf of the.
I don't understand the full ramifications of passing this versus not passing this, especially in light of the fact that a lot of these things are in the courts. So I will abstain.
Move the motion. Okay.